Welcome to our discussion on building AI-ready data foundation in asset management. I'm Ed Simmons, principal at Brook Advisors, joined by Alexey Utkin from DataArt's Data Analytics Lab and Thomas Mathew from Microsoft's Enterprise Partner Solutions Organization. Let me introduce the panel. Thomas is Senior Director and Technology Lead for Financial Services Industry at Microsoft. Thomas has spent the last 14 years enabling key partners on Microsoft Cloud services. He brings deep expertise in helping financial institutions leverage Microsoft's data platforms, AI capabilities, and partner ecosystem to drive digital transformation in banking, insurance, and capital markets. Alexey Utkin is head of the Data Analytics Lab and Finance Practice Lead at DataArt, where he has driven major financial enterprise accounts since joining in 2004. Alexey is based in DataArt's London office, where he leads the company's industry practice with expertise in solution architecture, technology consulting, and regulatory compliance for asset management, investment banks, and capital market firms. He specializes in building data foundations and AI capabilities. Thanks. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Recent reports show 80 to 90% of financial services AI pilots never make it into production. We're spending billions of dollars with a lot of hype, but most firms are stuck in what I call pilot purgatory. Today, we're going to talk about why, and more important, how to break through. So let's start with the failure pattern. Alexey, you've seen numerous AI initiatives across asset managers and investment banks. What's the common pattern when these pilots fail to scale or make it in production? And what are the common mistakes?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. And I'm sure there are many reasons, but from what I see, typically there are a few ones which are very, very common. So first of all, I think, and I observed today, is the biggest gap between what AI can do for a demo, like how quickly it is to put together a demo for a wonderful use case, which works through some scenario, and it genuinely impresses people. So it is very quick these days to do it, but then it is very long tail of bringing it to production, making sure it's all based on their robust and quality data, it's all governed, it's connected, and it can work in production. If you think of it, all these AI capabilities, they're exciting and they grow appetite for business users. Now we can do this thing and the other thing which we couldn't think of doing before this generation of AI power. But then fundamentally, these solutions, so these use cases, they're still complex internally, right? They still require all this foundations data, governance, but they also bring the new challenges, how you monitor those, how you, benchmark, how you make sure they work not only today, but tomorrow. Things like guardrails, are being discussed, which were not part of discussion 3-5 years ago. So they bring new challenges, and all these things, they sit on top of a situation which many organizations still haven't addressed, right? The data is siloed and spread across numerous systems with a lot of legacy technology, which makes it very difficult to pull this data in the context and actually make use of it for AI. And even if you then try to push these use cases to production, you spend maybe 100 times more effort and time comparing to what it took to produce the first kind of demo when it seemed to work, but you have very long tail today. So yeah, that's kind of what I see as a big major pattern of failure in this AI use case.
Thomas, CDOs and CTOs are tremendous pressure to realize value and deliver AI results, yet many are failing. What do you see the problems here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ed. Yeah, definitely we are in an era of warping innovations each day in the area of AI. There's a lot of pressure. I think it stems initially from the CEOs, and the CEOs themselves get pressured from their board and from market expectations to drive AI adoption for business transformation. CDOs and CTOs, I should call out, become the focal point to enabling this for across the various business units. So with regards to delivering results, I feel it's both a business and a technology problem to address. There are quite a few reports lately. It's a fast-changing world, and a recent report I should call out, like the MIT report on the business side of the fence, called out that only 95% of the organizations are, actually 95% of the organizations are seeing, low return on AI, meaning high AI adoption but low transformation. And this is mostly a business problem from that angle. But also want to point out that those 5% of integrated AI pilots are extracting millions in value as well. So the value is kind of determined by the approach. On the other hand, I also truly believe it's, based on all the efforts we have done with many customers and partners, it's also a technology problem. And Alexey kind of pointed that out. From a CDO and a CIO perspective, data is everything for leveraging AI to transform organizations. And AI is only as good as the data, whether employing predictive modeling or one is reasoning over knowledge, information, etc. So poor quality data leads to inaccurate predictions and inferences. And as Alexey also pointed out, we are dealing with, within organizations, data is scattered across systems with no unified access. They are siloed. The quality of data matters. The governance, there are governance gaps that we see. So lack of standards in security and privacy and compliance are paramount as well. So for CDOs and CTOs, enabling, I would say, what we are focused on and collectively with DataArt is enabling a solid data platform for governance, which is extremely critical. And it's also more evolutionary in that sense rather than revolutionary, because once we build a solid data platform and a governance framework, it's more future-proofed and innovations can happen at a warping speed. So that's my high-level view.
Thanks. Alexey, Thomas touched on modern data platforms. What's different about today's data platforms that make them game changers for AI?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I'd like to pick on one thing which Thomas said, which is a lot of adoption but lack of transformation, right? And I surely see it, and I think the modern data platforms is the part of this required transformation. If you think, what transformation is needed for an organization for this age of AI, right? One metaphor I heard is that we are now in a situation which is similar to 100 years ago, a little bit more than that, when a combustion engine is bundled on top of a horse, right? So that's your kind of picture of lack of real transformation. And for many organizations that is related, at least in a part, to the technology. So we mentioned legacy systems, data being locked in there, spread across different legacy technology. So for this AI age, organizations need to really simplify, and that should allow them to attain the speed of change, which is required for everyone to really adopt AI and transform with it. So a lot of the modern data platforms, they are architecturally and technology-wise actually much simpler. They built on a lot of evolution and open standards and formats and all these great things which were happening in the data industry in the last 5-10 years. But today is much easier to build and adopt and operate and evolve the platform, which is based on cloud technologies like those coming from Microsoft. So I think it is important ingredient of success, simplification. Thomas mentioned as well, of course, things like governance, lineage, data quality, they should all be baked in, right? You don't want your AI to go and use, data which is found somewhere, which is unknown quality and unknown provenance, right? That's definitely a recipe for failure. And maybe the last bit on the platforms is, AI capabilities and use cases, they also require some net new things, which were not a common part of technology landscape like 5 years ago. Many of us heard of, vector databases, knowledge graphs. all these new kind of techniques and technologies which make AI work more accurately, not hallucinate, or you being able to actually monitor it and make sure it works in a governed, controlled way and doesn't go crazy. So as well, if you're in a position to build all this with your hands in your legacy environment, you're kind of really in a disadvantaged position. All the cloud, technology vendors, data vendors, like Microsoft here, they all really work hard to make sure this building block is there for you to use for your AI capabilities. So that's kind of my wrap on modern platforms.
Yeah, I'd like to add a few things. I think one of the other keys of these modern platforms is in the olden days, you generally had to replace your old platform with a new platform. I think one of the key things is these modern platforms can evolutionarily replace or work in conjunction with the legacy. I think the technology really supports that very well. And I think the other key thing is by these cloud technologies being serverless, they're pay per use. So the financial impact is smaller to your scale. And I think the idea that you can get started right away providing business value at a reasonable price in a reasonable time frame is really what makes the idea of new data platforms to support AI so compelling. Let's take a Microsoft point of view, Thomas. You mentioned data is everything and it's an evolution. How does Microsoft's approach with Fabric, OneLake, and Purview align with this?
Yeah, I think the undercurrents and the need, Alexey kind of elaborated we need something that is fairly simple, and you touched on serverless. And so, yeah, this is a modern data platform. And I also want to take a step back and say from a Microsoft strategy perspective in this age of AI, it's basic. Our effort is mostly focused on building trust in data and AI. We want to make sure that the data is accessible, governed, and of high quality, and that the models that we are employing are transparent and auditable. And Microsoft heavily focuses on collaboration and efficiency of collaboration across organizations. So with that as the impetus behind, we basically have two key platforms. And as you mentioned, Fabric in it is OneLake, and then Purview for data governance. Microsoft Fabric is our unified cloud-based AI-powered data platform, specifically to simplify data management and analytics. And it's a software as a service. And to your point earlier, it's very easy to stage it up, right? And it brings in integrated services like data engineering. We also have Data Factory to instrument ingestion and transformation of data from various constituent sources. It also brings in the ability to do data science over it, which is the key here. And real-time analytics is another area. It also supports data warehousing and databases as well. So it's an end-to-end data services all the way from ingestion and into visualization as well. So we have Power BI capabilities also folded in. And so the key, areas that, again, I wanted to stress here is that we are unifying services all across rather than having discrete individual services. So it accelerates that time to market. Underpinning Microsoft Fabric is this OneLake, which is essentially a single unified logical data lake for your entire enterprise. And I think the key is that it offers one copy of the data to use with multiple analytics engines. So we're bringing that data plane and having multiple engines compute or work on it. So that centralized data access is key because it prevents a lot of duplication, fragmentation, and allowing all teams to access the very same data sources. Data consistency is key. It reduces the error that's there, and Alexey kind of touched on legacy systems. So it's very easy to we want to make sure that the data that's represented here is the latest and greatest, and the data sets, and that data sharing of those data sets promotes that collaboration. Another key platform, in addition to Fabric, is Microsoft Purview, which is our comprehensive data governance and compliance solution that helps organizations to manage and protect and gain insights from their data. Purview specifically addresses the data quality through automated data discovery, classifications, and even lineage, as was mentioned earlier. And also ensuring compliance. We are in a very regulated space here within financial services that I cover banking, insurance, and capital markets verticals in general. So ensuring compliance is a key element that's enabled in Purview, reducing the risk of those AI deployment. And finally, I would say transparency, visibility into how data is used and transformed, which is very critically needed for explainability, right, in a regulated space. So these two in particular platforms, I would say collectively minimizes a lot of our point about root causes of AI failure.
Alexey, how do you get started? A CIO or CDO comes up to you saying, I need a new AI ready infrastructure. What do you tell them how to get started about next steps?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And usually I think that the problem starts with how you even define what is AI ready, right? Because in a year time, maybe AI will be quite different shape. So I like to split it into kind of three levels, right? So one is the technology, fixing all this foundation, just getting rid of unnecessary waste, right? If you just super inefficient in how you bring your data in, how you transform it, how you bring it to the users, they're just not where you want to be in 2025. It's certainly not AI ready, right? So kind of making sure the technology is there. So this unified ecosystem where you can bring data coming from different places, because I think one thing we learned with appearance of data mesh and similar sort of developments in the industry is almost all organizations actually eventually struggle with centralization, right? They sooner or later, some new data sets, some new systems will need to be brought in, and I think AI actually only multiplies these chances, right? Across many AI use cases, we see you need, okay, let's take this new data set from there. Let's use this agent which will get web data and so on and so on. So it increases the power and again, appetite grows. You want to bring more data in. So this is your kind of technology layer, things we discussed. Then you have your kind of transformation of the operating model. Some new skills, new ways of working need to be adopted. And that includes, kind of things like data governance, maybe even figuring out how you do AI governance in an organization is at least right thing to start thinking about. But also things like data as a product and some of the other kind of organizational, operational paradigms. So figuring out, how the organization should work in relation to data once this new platform is there. And the third, of course, and actually it's not the third in my view, it's the first, but that's the business value, right? And here, a good thing that as a starting point, as Ed, you mentioned, you don't have to bring all the organization in, right? You don't have to bring all the business domains. It doesn't have to be one big bang migration, which takes like 3 years and everyone is frustrated how long it takes. You can indeed split it kind of by business domain. So say portfolio management and risk, or investor relations, or investor analytics. You can pick and choose those who are on board, who would benefit first, etc., etc. But then you also want to kind of cross-check what is the art of possible. What's opportunity there to use AI for what they're doing in this business unit? And things like, what we see a lot in asset management is like data being shared between counterparties, with your fund admins, with with investors on platforms, which allow commonly shared data, data marketplaces, alternative data, all these things just, they may be not seen by CTO or CDO or someone in an organization as, required, but at least cross-check, okay, would the business benefit from this, arguably new capabilities enabled by the technologies. And of course, AI use cases is also a big part of this business value, right? What in this business function can be done today, tomorrow with AI or agents. So that's a kind of starting point. And once we draw this big picture, we can of course dive into details, implementation, but that's more like of technicalities.
Thomas, do you think the organizations are ready for these kind of new models, and how do you tell them to prepare?
Yeah, and I would say personally myself, I think they're partially ready, especially on like data governance, especially given such a surge that is driven by AI adoption. One of the recent reports that I can think of, I think the data governance program and the adoption of it is actually increasing. That's a good sign. It's about 71% according to one of the recent reports, which is up from 60% back in 2023. So most enterprises do recognize the importance of governance and investing in it. But I think there's still areas of improvement. I think many are still maturing their framework, and they do lack standardized models. Automation and AI governance are also critical steps in this, and there are still gaps there. Success also depends on organizational alignment from a business perspective and leadership buy-ins, etc. So we need to have a very good scalable framework that's pervasively applied across organizations. So this is, I think, I need to point out that Microsoft, relies on very strategic partners like DataArt to help financial institutions build a robust governance program and framework. And so it's good to have this, combination of forces here to help organizations be ready. And it can indeed be achieved because we see a spectrum of maturity levels in this area. So yeah, I think it's there and it's getting better.
Alexey, how do data mesh models and domain models help organizations adopt new governance models?
Yeah, wow, it's actually a deep question, Dan, but I think a number of ways. So, for those who don't know, very, very quickly, so data mesh allows you to build your data architecture in a decentralized way where a lot of things happen on a business domain level. So say your portfolio or risk or investor relations, et cetera, and kind of only bare minimum or things which are required to span all organization happen on a kind of platform and governance levels. So in this way, it addresses the questions which span all organization, like the fundamental principles of data governance, platform governance, in a, on a company level, but in a small group. But then it pushes a lot of real governance for data and now more for AI use cases into these business domains where it actually is far more meaningful. So, they're much closer to data. They understand what it is. They understand it in a business context. They know what it means for clients, for investors. They know what it means for the firm. They know what it means for regulators, right? It's more like giving them tools and platform and process, but a lot of this governance actually happens where it best to be served. And one of the paradigms in data mesh is data as a product. So if you think of what data governance typically requires for your data to be well described, to be secured, to be, to have lineage, to have data quality, etc., etc. These questions, when they are paired with the fundamental question of, building a data product, which is I want to, deliver value through this thing, which, consumers can use on their own without, poking me directly, then all these governance concerns are very real, just functional requirements for this data product. And this is, I think, how it gets pushed down.
Thomas, could you talk about governance? Are you where you've seen governance be an actual advantage for companies to accelerate development?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a great question. Data governance truly accelerates deployment, and most certainly, it also provides a very competitive advantage as well. For example, definitely it reduces data preparation time. All models, AI models need clean and consistent and well-labeled data. So governance enforces those data standards, and as mentioned earlier, the lineage and the metadata management. So teams can, they basically end up spending less time fixing errors and more time building agents and agentic systems. It also ensures compliance and lowers risk. So the framework embeds the focus on privacy and security and regulatory controls upfront. So this avoids a lot of delays. That's sometimes downstream with, happens with legal reviews and reworks when it infringes on compliance cases. Data discoverability is a huge aspect, I think, with data catalogs and proper stewardship and roles put in place. Teams can quickly find the right data sets, right, within a vast organization, and it eliminates that duplication and accelerates experimentation too. I think the business stakeholders in particular, they trust AI outputs when they know that the data that feeds it is governed, and it reduces that also the resistance and speeds up model deployments into production. And then there's this aspect of automation, right, where governance policies can be automated, like tagging sensitive data, enforcing retention rules. So this makes AI pipelines more repeatable and auditable, which is critical for scaling. So in short, I think to that question, I think, yes, good, solid governance shifts the AI from this data wrangling to true focus on AI innovation. And that is critical to maintaining, I would say, the competitive edge as well.
So we touched on data risk. There's also kind of different risk models for different types of AI. Alexey, can you talk about the risk models for different types of AI and what kind of categories and strategy you recommend?
Yeah, I kind of really break it down in what I see into three main categories. So in terms of like how risky it is to use AI there and there. And of course, different frameworks like EU AI Act have their definitions of what is high risk AI use cases and so on. But I think really everyone seems to agree that the lowest risk is if, say, engineers use AI and then they generate code or they produce some kind of internal artifacts and then they're positioned to validate it. And I think that actually explains why these days we see and we read in analyst reports that the biggest adoption of AI is actually in engineering. All these companies like Anthropic and Microsoft, etc., OpenAI, they all very much focus these days on how these things, how the models code, are the tools and whatever APIs are well suited for engineers. So and there is a reason for that, right? Because engineers with all their skills are in a great position to debug, validate, monitor, go around the imperfections and undeterministic nature of these models we see in Gen AI. So that's a kind of lower risk, right? Is use it in a copilot mode. The second would be internal use cases, right? Automation of the workflows and so on and so on. So something not exposed directly to clients or to critical business decisions without a separate step of validation. And the third would be, of course, this last one, right, where you actually expose it to the end user, where there are no specific stops and human in the loop checking things, etc., etc. And this category, I think, is most of the clients, most of the organizations, they are excited about potential in this category, but unless there are like genuine low risk customer facing use cases, they don't rush there just because everyone understands it's far more risky, it's difficult to control, monitor, put guardrails in, etc., etc. So they start mostly with the first two. That's kind of how I see it.
How can model ops, which we've been doing model validation for years in financial services, how can model ops help reduce risk?
Yeah, that's a good point, because indeed in finance, model validation is there for many years now, and it prescribes certain controls in the process of validation and auditing of the models. And in a broad sense, AI, Gen AI, LLM models, they're just another type of models, right? So everything what this model validation requirements had before applies here. And in one way, maybe financial organizations in a better position, because they typically would have framework and a process to validate the models and control those and see the inputs, outputs. But I think there is still one big kind of difference, which is being introduced with the use of Gen AI. I think it pushes the emphasis or focus of this model validation from the model itself, like how it behaves internally. So like, say, 10 years ago, you had stochastic model and you would need to go and validate the algorithm of the model itself. These days with Gen AI, you almost don't do that, but you need to make sure that you have all the kind of end-to-end surrounding ecosystem. You need to validate that the data going in is correct, that you have guardrails, you have monitoring, benchmarking, what if model is upgraded, all these scenarios of how this thing can fail or start misbehaving, you need to address, and that's actually a difference comparing to what it was before. So you kind of look much broader.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing, human in the loop models. Can you talk about that, Alexey, and then Thomas as well?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, human in the loop is not necessarily a model itself. It's more like how you use it. It's a workflow around it, and I think as of today, that's the best practice, right? You kind of still, for majority of use cases, you want a specialist, being it maybe sometimes a technology specialist or engineer or analyst or someone from the business, to use the models in a workflow to amplify their knowledge, their expertise, what they are doing, help them, rather than, again, completely go on their own and do their thing. I think everyone agrees with agents, with all these different deployment scenarios, that's highly preferential, just based on what models are today.
Thomas, what are you seeing? Use of human in the loop workflows with your customers.
Yeah, so it's actually a very important topic where, from a Microsoft standpoint, our overall mission is to empower every person, right, and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So our AI focus is also centered on that foundation. We believe in human-centered AI, where people and organizations should decide how they should leverage the technologies. And also in terms of business processes flow, humans are interluded as part of these business processes. There's a new, transparently, there's a new focus from our side in terms of building frontier firms from an agentic AI enablement standpoint. And it primarily has 3 levels in its journey and progression, I should say. So the level 1 is actually human first, and which is what we have seen in most of the AI solutions these days, which is an employee has an AI assistant that helps them to work better and faster. And this is where technologies like M365 Copilots come in. The level 2 in that progression is humans with agents, and this notion of a frontier firm graduating to level 2, where every team will have not only manage its a combination of humans and agents, but it would include AI agents to do certain specific tasks, but it's all entirely managed by humans to complete those tasks, even though certain granular steps are done autonomously by agents. There's also a level 3 where we call it as agents with humans, and still humans are involved, and primarily the onus is on the humans are to set directions, and agents execute those business processes, checking in, or eliciting clarity from humans as needed. And so this is the way we kind of phase it out in general. From a financial institution standpoint, and our focus on the industry across banking, insurance, and capital markets, in this case with asset management specifically, it's about transforming the customer or the client experience, and so it's and empowering the employees in their roles to perform better. So humans are definitely integral part of this agentic AI and AI applications in general.
Yeah, so Thomas, you mentioned the three different phases. What do you guys tell your clients about prioritizing strategy versus quick wins, and how do they know how to invest, and what's the best practice from a Microsoft point of view?
Yeah, so it's a very tricky question that we have to constantly look at short-term goals and long-term alignment as well. So um, I think the key is that that there's certain you know quick wins, as you said, right, where we look at an ROI that is easily feasible with doing certain projects that is easily executed. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we have clear business alignment and have strategic intent. So that's where the long-term focus is definitely needed. Much of the scrutiny these days with AI solutions is looking at business outcomes, areas of cost reductions, and areas of where the ROI is. So we want to keep the long-term business alignment in mind. And so I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's both a combination of business and ensuring that the technologies can do it, as well as the governance and the infrastructure that's put in place. So I think one of the key things is sometimes we focus too much on short-term goals and pilots, and they seem to fail because no one has looked at it from a longer-term view. So I think it's extremely critical. And many of the engagements and efforts that I do, we do start off with business alignments and long-term goals. Who are the stakeholders from a business perspective, and what is the measurable ROI? As I mentioned earlier, there's personal productivity that is absolutely critical. It's sometimes very difficult to measure or align personal productivity to business impact. So we want to also undertake simultaneously the long-term use cases that are sometimes gnarly and that can be solved with AI and agentic systems. So alignment with business strategies and intent is critical. And investments and sponsorship across the various organizations that buy-in is critical as well. I think the technology is there in many respects to solve many of the complex, and it's fast evolving. Standards are also evolving. As I mentioned earlier, the governance is a key element of this that we can easily put in place for the projects to be successful. So that's primarily a good way to look at things. Is there are sometimes short-term goals and projects that we can quickly undertake and show the potential, and then also aligning to the CXO's business, initiatives and outcomes that we also want to see from a horizon viewpoint as well.
I guess let me throw it to Alexey. What separates companies that actually succeed in getting pilots into production? What do you see? What are the critical success factors?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit building on what Thomas just was describing. I think it is combination, right? So the companies which choose to go after individual use case or bunch of individual use cases oftentimes quickly realize it can be super overwhelming for them, right? And these days, even there are lots of AI point solutions, right? We all know that 99% of AI companies are wrappers around the model, right? It's kind of easy these days, relatively easy to produce AI, business or a product, a tool which is enabled by AI. If you kind of apply your traditional way of going after such solutions with your procurement cycle and scanning for what's there on the market for my use case, etc., and you go for like buy versus build, then it can be super overwhelming in the age of AI. Like I can tell I do quite a bit of AI myself, and for some elements of what I'm doing, there may be like 20 different options to use ready tool. But even for me, even to evaluate these options would take longer than in some cases it would take me to just use model and implement it myself. So I think one, I kind of question this, the scenario of let's just go after the use case. I think what's important is to have at least a formulated view of what your kind of AI strategy is in terms of how you go about building it or buying this use case, where you buy, where you bring it in, where you build internal capability to turn around and deliver these use cases. You again look at the foundations and so on. These days, probably what you don't want to do right away is you don't want to build like a lot of technology or custom technology on your own to support these things. Use platforms that allows you start much quicker, get it to production much quicker, with all the tick boxes on foundations. So yeah, I think that's a kind of combination. So an informed view on how you go about use cases, where you buy, where you build your own, using platforms, and then having the strategy around the whole thing, like what you want to achieve, not only in terms of use cases, but how your organizational capability to adopt AI should be evolving like this year, next year, and so on.
It's interesting. We got a question from the audience about when do we build our own AI internally versus using a vendor? You touched on it there. When do we want to keep it close to the vest versus when do we want to potentially use external resources, and how do you make that call?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who are these external resources. Like if DataArt is a company, we help a lot of clients in this regard to adopt these new technologies, new skills, new ways of thinking, new use cases. We really accelerate our clients and support them going there. If these external resources are product companies, my personal opinion, I would look at like the depth of their technology and expertise, right? If they were sitting in this use case or category of use cases for a long time, accumulated industry traction, industry relations, partnerships, or integrations with a lot of ecosystem, validated a lot of hypotheses on their product, and so on and so on. That's certainly a strong thing to consider as buying or bringing it in. If it is just a wrapper around things, again, I would ask the question of how unique it is, and is it easier to buy or to do your own kind of implementation around it. Again, just because oftentimes evaluation takes much longer. Maybe the last bit of advice here is I see a lot of companies and teams still thinking about AI as a thing which is an area of like data scientists and ML engineers and so on. So they kind of, because of what it was, 5-10 years ago, which requires a lot of, maths, computer science, analytical skills, and so on, they kind of not jumping in. They don't feel it's their area. I think this one thing should switch in mind. I think AI is really easy to use most of the time. Yes, there are a lot of complexity in technology, etc. But for pretty much anyone in most of the business roles, they are in a position to adopt AI or some of AI for what they are doing and play a role in adoption of the new use cases with AI. So I think this barrier should break really. Not see it as some very complex, difficult to adopt technology where you need specialists. Embrace it on your own.
Thomas, how does Microsoft share that view of generalizing AI across the enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, we truly believe in democratizing AI, so employees within organizations can actually quickly concoct and instrument business process automations with AI, etc. So, from my perspective, there are two classes of users. There are business users, and then those are building specialized agentic systems. And usually for business users, we have low code, no code platforms. So Microsoft is basically building platforms that enables end users to build agents and agent systems, right? And so on the low code, no code side, platforms like Microsoft Copilot Studio enables end users to quickly build agents and agentic systems and publish them with their peers or within their organizations. It actually brings in knowledge from various backend source systems. We have tons of connectors, over 1,900 connectors in the library from some of the best software providers. So business users can quickly concoct these solutions. On the other hand, there's also need for pro code development where for AI agentic systems to be built that are very specialized, addressing some complex engineering problems for the industry. And that's where we also bring platforms like Azure AI Foundry and associated services. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the data becomes important. So that's where Fabric gets folded in. In many cases, these agent systems go after multiple data sources, so the data platform is equally important. Yeah, so I think building on those platforms accelerate the time to market. And and again, there are open source adoption widely these days, SDKs, etc. So I think a combination of this really empowers organizations to build depending on the target audience the right way.
Okay. In view of that, I'll talk to Alexey first and then you, Thomas. We got another question from the audience. Is the biggest challenges in technology, it's people educating AI literacy and overcoming resistance within the organization. Alexey first, then Thomas.
Yeah, I think it's kind of bringing it to my previous statement. I think a lot of it is just pushing on the need for everyone to embrace it and showcasing how it is done across organization. That's what I see successful. So basically sending a message for everyone to start using it and sharing their success. I think I'm certainly, from what I see with like what we do in data and engineering and architecture, etc., I see AI as a leverage for specialists. I actually never seen it yet as a replacement for expertise, for knowledge, etc. So I think, again, I would double down on this message. The knowledge workers, the specialists, they just amplify it and they become more productive. But you also, I think you're right asking this question, because I think this human element and not only the skills, but how people feel about adoption AI requires just separate dealing with it, communications and maybe an organizational forum around it, because many people are afraid, and these are the genuine feelings, and as well, it does change the profile of work. I can tell you in engineering and architecture, some years ago, we were creating things, and 90% of things would work right away, and 10% you fight and debug and polish it. Right now, this part which works, LLM do it. You actually, arguably, you do now more intense, harder, less satisfying work sometimes, but you are more productive. But as a person, you may feel different. So I think it does require separate attention as a factor, and kind of recognizing it and communicating around it in the organization is important.
Thomas, your view on organization and people?
Yeah, it's a very important topic. Yeah, I think Alexey very sufficiently covered many of the elements here. I mean, end of the day, organizations view AI as a tool for empowerment, not replacement, I should say. There's a lot of, there's definitely undercurrents of fear sometimes, whether it's going to replace their jobs, etc. I think the key is we are beginning to see areas where especially the area of automation, I should call out, where we are focusing mostly on those mundane tasks, right? Reducing those repetitive tasks, data entries, and report generations. And then there are areas where we can actually absolutely improve client services. And so AI is more of an enabler, even in personal productivity as well as for the organization in general. I think there are a lot of aspects that we also within Microsoft, want to address this from a people standpoint. One is creating, I would suggest, like organizations create safe places, spaces for learning where employees can actually voice their thoughts and concerns, if any. I think involvement of various teams is also important in pilot projects. So there's varying thought processes and a feeling of ownership in building these projects together. One thing that we have internally done is also create a lot of AI champions across organizations as well. Just being transparent and vocal. This is not about mass replacement at all. In fact, it's all about focusing and tackling some of those areas where AI can truly and indeed help and alleviate those individuals from focusing on those to a higher level plane of addressing business issues. And so underneath this is a continuous learning. AI literacy, as mentioned, is a key element in here. And I think the leaders of the organization have the burden to also communicate a clear vision that perhaps we are very clearly stating that we are building an AI empowered firm where people and technology can work together, right, to deliver better outcomes. And that's the emphasis here. It's not about specific roles that we are going after. So I think reinforcing that AI is an enabler over and over again and not a threat, I think kind of allays they see practical implementation of that. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think to sum up, we've talked for almost an hour here, and both of you have talked about a holistic approach, starting with data, governance, the right platform, the right level of automation, and then finally we talked about people. Once again, a holistic approach here that touching all these areas, I think is the right method to success. It's not that we can't do things quickly; it's that we just have to think about a lot when we act here. And I want to thank both of you guys, both Thomas and Alexey, and the audience for coming here today. And let's continue the conversation online.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.